All right, let's get into it. Today, we're going to put on our financial analyst hats. Think of this as a formal audit. We're not just looking at some big power plant, we're peeling back the layers on a billion-dollar energy deal. We want to know what makes it tick and, what makes it completely fall apart. And our whole audit, it really starts with one simple question.
It's a question that really stumps a lot of people, right? You see this massive piece of infrastructure, all this steel, concrete, these huge turbines, and you just assume it has to be valuable. But then you hear about a lender taking control, the project going bankrupt, and you just have to wonder, how on earth does that happen? And that right there is the absolute heart of the matter. See, the real value and the real risk, it's got nothing to do with the physical stuff you can see. It's all hidden away, locked up in a huge stack of paperwork, contracts, permissions, all these legal agreements. The steel, that's just a tool. The paper is where the money is actually made or lost.
So let's officially begin our audit. To really understand any power project, you have to completely change the way you look at it. We're going to break down the 5 core drivers that determine what a plant is truly worth financially.
This right here, this is a fundamental mind shift. You have to stop thinking about a machine that generates electricity. Start thinking about a stack of legal rights. You're not buying a machine, you're buying the legally protected ability to make and sell power. And you can only do it under very, very specific conditions.
So these are the 5 pillars. If you get all these right, you've basically got a machine that prints cash. But if you get even one of them wrong, you're looking at a distressed asset, plain and simple. Now, things like permits and how the deal is financed are obviously crucial. But today, we're really going to focus on the 2 areas where most of these projects either live or die: their revenue and their access to the grid.
And that brings us to what is probably the single most important question in any power deal. How predictable is the cash flow? I'm telling you, the answer to that question determines absolutely everything, from how much the plant is worth to whether it even survives.
So, look, you've really only got 2 ways to sell your power. The first one is what we call a power purchase agreement, or a PPA. Think of it like this. It's like having a 20-year lease on an apartment. You've locked in a buyer, you've locked in a price. Super stable. The other model, that's called merchant. And this is like being an Uber driver during a crazy storm with surge pricing. You sell your power for whatever the market will pay you, second by second. Yeah, prices can totally spike, but man, they can also just completely collapse.
You can see the trade-off so clearly here. A PPA is super low risk, and it delivers these stable, almost bond-like returns. That's exactly why it says banks benefit, because they just love predictability. The merchant model, on the other hand, is extremely high risk, but it offers these potentially explosive returns. It's really the playground for savvy operators who know how to navigate that kind of volatility.
So here's the key takeaway. When you hear about a power plant failing, I guarantee you 9 times out of 10, it's because it was completely exposed to the wild swings of that merchant market. Its revenue just became totally unpredictable, and it couldn't cover its costs or, more importantly, its debt payments.
And the process is just brutally simple. A developer builds the plant, usually financed with a gigantic loan, because they're expecting high power prices. But then, the market turns. Prices collapse, the revenue just dries up, and suddenly they can't make their loan payments anymore. The project defaults, and the lender, the bank, steps right in and takes control of the whole thing.
Okay, so you've got your revenue model figured out. But that's totally worthless if you can't actually deliver your product. And this brings us to the next critical piece of paper in our audit, one that is often worth more than the entire power plant itself.
It's called an interconnection agreement. And in the simplest terms, it is the legal permission slip that lets you plug your power plant into the grid. Without this one document, all you own is a very, very expensive piece of land with some fancy equipment sitting on it.
Now, this might sound crazy, but it's a fact. The right to connect is often worth more than the thing you're connecting. So why is that? It's because our electrical grid is just totally congested. You can build a solar farm almost anywhere, but you can't just plug it in anywhere. Getting into the line, the queue, to connect can take 3, 5, sometimes even 7 years.
And that is the key insight that everyone is finally waking up to now. With this explosion of data centers for AI and the huge rise in electric vehicles, the demand for power is just soaring. But the bottleneck isn't a lack of people wanting to build new power plants. The real bottleneck is the grid's limited capacity to actually handle all that new electricity.
Okay, so we figured out why these plants fail. Now, let's switch gears and look at how really sophisticated investors see this failure, not as an end, but as a massive opportunity.
They literally go hunting in the wreckage.
They use a pretty clever strategy called loan to own. So instead of trying to buy the power plant directly, they go out and buy its debt from the original lender, usually at a big discount. They know the plant is probably going to default, and when it does, they step in and become the new owners. They get the keys to a billion-dollar asset for pennies on the dollar.
They can do this because they understand that owning something is not the same as controlling it. The company name on the sign out front might say owner, but the real power, that lies with whoever controls the cash. That's the lender holding the debt, it's the PPA buyer who guarantees the revenue, and it's the grid operator who decides when you're even allowed to sell your power.
And one of the smartest plays in these volatile merchant markets right now is battery storage. The strategy is just simple arbitrage. You're basically acting like a power speculator. You buy and charge your giant batteries in the middle of the night when electricity is dirt cheap, maybe $20 a megawatt hour. Then you just wait. And during a heat wave at 5 p.m. when demand goes through the roof, you sell that power back to the grid for, say, $300. The difference between those two numbers, that's pure profit.
So how can you take all of this information and actually apply it yourself? How do you start to think like a fund manager who's analyzing one of these deals? Well, it all comes down to a really simple 5-point audit.
So, anytime you're looking at an energy asset, I want you to ask these 5 questions. Seriously. First, where does the revenue come from? Is it that stable PPA we talked about, or is it that wild merchant model? Second, how stable is it? Right? Is this cash flow secure? That tells you if you're looking at a bank stream or some investor's big gamble. Third, who's really in control of the cash? Is it the lender, the PPA buyer, or the grid operator who's calling the shots? Fourth, and this is a big one, where's the bottleneck? You got to find the weak point. Is it that super valuable interconnection agreement? And finally, number 5, what's the diagnosis? Why is this asset broken? And even more important, can you fix it? If you can answer those 5 questions, you've cracked the code. You get the deal.
Because in the end, that's what this all really boils down to. The physical act of generating power, that's becoming a commodity. The real lasting value is in the contracts and the permissions that give you control. The control to decide who gets to sell power, when they get to sell it, and at what price. And believe me, that's where the real power lies.